Do you agree that most people can be trusted?
I think that I am pretty skeptical when it comes to people holistically.
I did not know that there were different countries around the world with different levels of trust. That while there's a trust crisis happening in some places, other places seem to be having a good time in terms of their trust in the media, their trust in their politics or their governments. It's odd. And it was probably a bit surprising for me to find that there have been surveys done in our country, on Trinidad and Tobago, in a global context. The World Values Survey, which is an international research project that has been conducting standardized, nationally representative social surveys inquiring about political, socioeconomic, and cultural values of people around the world for decades. And in 2010 and in 2014, we were a part of this survey. And one of the questions that was asked, that was, the map that was shown on this website to give us this data to see where people stood, countries stood, was an answer to the question, do you agree that most people can be trusted? You had countries on the top end, like Norway and Sweden and so on, upwards of maybe 60%, and of people believe most people could be trusted. That's amazing. You had countries like New Zealand, where we are right now, in the 50s. You had the US in 30-something% thereabouts. And this survey would have gone on up until 2022, but our country, Trinidad and Tobago, would have participated in it in 2010 and 2014. On the low end of the scale, you have countries like Colombia, Brazil, Peru, all less than 10% of the people there would believe that most people can be trusted. And there, down at the bottom, among the lowest countries, was Trinidad and Tobago at 3.2% in 2014, down from 3.8% in 2010, in terms of how many participants agreed that most people could be trusted.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
That's genuine cause for concern. Not just in terms of Trinidad and Tobago, but even the US being at 30%.
30-something.
Oh, okay.
30 odd.
30 odd.
Well, and that's in 2022, I believe.
That's still pretty low.
It's still pretty low.
It's
not 3%.
Well, it's not 3%. Fair. But it's still pretty low for a country that is as respected globally as the US.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what the trend looked like over time. I think I saw one of the graphs where it, from the 50s to now, generally it declined. There's a general decline.
And trust in the media and trust in governments. And this is not for all countries. It's interesting, right? To see, I believe China had the highest trust in media within them. And, the US might have been in the bottom 10 of those particular countries that were evaluated. And China was up there in the high 60s, even 70% of, respondents trusting in their media. It's amazing to see the differences among us. But I guess a big part of my question is, is it a global crisis if some countries aren't experiencing this and others are? And for those of us who are, because this is now apparently an us thing, right? What does that mean for our trajectory as a nation? What does it mean for our place in the world? What does it mean for global dynamics in the future? If there is low trust, if there are calls for something to be done because trust is at an all-time low in different places because there's a crisis.
This is definitely not something to take lightly, because a society with that level of distrust for institutions as reputable as, or supposedly reputable as the media or government, is a reflection of a breakdown that is happening in some way when it comes to whether it be the information that is being communicated to them or they're being able to receive it, understand it, distill it, believe that it's true. I mean, we live in unprecedented times. Now, being exposed to so much information coming at us daily through social media and...
How do you know? How do you know which news report to trust from which media house? And
the world is pretty polarized holistically. You know, we're seeing wars happening in the Middle East. We're seeing the Ukraine-Russia thing. We're seeing challenges happening within the US in and of itself, you know. So the polarization of the people is a reflection of the distrust that is, the people don't trust the information that they're getting, so they're forming their own opinions.
And they're forming uninformed opinions? Is that, I mean, we can go all over the place when it comes to this, but I think where we landed after these, you know, weeks of reading and discussion and exploration was, okay, we may not be able to solve the world's issues on trust, but maybe we could break it down to the smallest, simplest possible component, being trust in each other as individuals and trust in ourselves. What makes a person trustworthy? What makes, you know, what makes me worthy of trust from the point of view of, is it that it's a fixed thing? Can I work on things to become more trustworthy as a person? What can I look for in somebody else to know whether they are somebody who should be trusted? Because now I'm thinking that I have met a lot of amazing people, and so have you, from back home. There are a lot of people that I see as, you know, worthy of trust, but our general view or our clear, from based on this survey, our clear position in general is that, well, most people can't be trusted. What are we losing as a society, as a nation, from having a wall up in general, a guilty until proven innocent vibe with each other? Have you ever experienced that, where you entered a situation and people were just, I don't know, walls up first? Are you that person?
I can't speak to whether I would have...
You know, but you could, I guess you could sense it, right? You could sense there's a suspicious...
From my interactions with people, it doesn't seem as though that is the case, right? Okay. But... What
about you? Can you say, do you believe most people can be trusted?
I am a skeptic when it comes to people. One that my skepticism has been brought under the radar even more so as of recently in terms of exploring this topic. But just within my own self and making an analysis of the decisions that I make and experiences that I would have had. And yeah, I think that I am pretty skeptical when it comes to people holistically, so that I would not be one to agree that most people can be trusted, notwithstanding that there's a fair amount of context that is associated with that concept of most people being trusted. You know, most people being trusted to do what, you know, like, or in what circumstance. And there's so many layers to that. But if somebody were to come step to me with a survey like that, I would be one to disagree that most people can be trusted. But there's also the side of me that has been pretty open to experiencing others and giving them the benefit of the doubt in interacting with them on a day-to-day.
You take a fair amount of risk.
I do, you know, and you meet people for the first time, you treat with them with the understanding that inherently they're good people. I start there, you know.
But isn't that what this is? Isn't that saying, if you start from thinking people are inherently good people, isn't that, you know, a proxy for, well, most people could be trusted if they're good?
Well, I understand the connection that you're making, but I'll say that starting with the proxy that most people are inherently good just means that I'm starting with the understanding that I will treat you as innocent before pronouncing guilt, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm going in with floodgates open for trust. The trust part of it is something that's pretty iterative. It happens over time with a fair amount of what I would hope and consider to be healthy skepticism,
Right.
in that I'm not naive to the malevolence that exists in the world, and that people may have their own motives and their own agenda that may not align with mine. And if it comes down to making a decision that is in their best interest versus mine, they probably will make a decision that is in their best interest. And if somebody's decision is not taking my interest into account, then that's not behavior that warrants trust in the long term for me. So that I would be a little more cautious in the way that I would approach people. But it doesn't mean that I'm starting from the place of most people can be trusted. Like that sounds like
it's a little too much.
It's a little too much for my comfort.
Okay, so maybe let's discuss what trust is. We came across a great definition in one of the papers that we were looking at on a chapter on trust and psychology in the neurobiology of trust. It's a book, right? Great definition. What is trust? It's the confidence that one will find what is desired from another rather than what is feared. And I feel like that is what maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm using your proxy differently, because I know you're differentiating something between people are probably inherently good versus people could be trusted. But for me, I guess if I think somebody is inherently good and or can be trusted, I would think that that thing I desire from you, let's say that maybe you might have some teeth but that you wouldn't bite me, is what I would get and not the thing I fear. So that trust might be akin to a relationship with an animal that you just meet, a dog. And as a animal lover myself, there's another dog that I would see that I wouldn't want to say, oh my God, I want to pet you as a puppy, and much to probably your annoyance. But there's a fundamental belief there that even though you have teeth, you will not bite me. And therefore, there's something in me that's saying, well, I trust that I will find what is desired in you, which is a great wagging tail and lovely puppy eyes and a couple of licks, and you'd enjoy these pets, then you would turn and snap and bite me.
But even in interacting, so let's use that dog analogy for a second and go a little further.
Sure.
Would it be a situation where you would, in petting the dog, you would probably pet the top of its head? You wouldn't put your hand by its mouth?
I mean, to be honest, I would probably hold its whole face. But I mean, I guess... All
right, so how much of it's connected to the kind of dog that it is? If it is a poodle versus a pit bull?
I mean, maybe there would be a bit more caution if you see a pit bull, but I mean, just the other day we saw a 3-legged pit bull, and we both know that there was nothing in me that could have stopped me from wanting and truly hugging up the dog, right? But I guess there's a vibe. Right? So maybe there's a vibe check that happens. Some sort of instinct that says...
and I think that's what I would agree with that. Like you meet somebody for the first time and you make an assessment or a judgment. It could be a snap judgment, but it comes straight from the instinct.
Yeah.
And you trust that because... So it's more maybe me trusting myself and my judgment versus trusting the person.
I like that.
Yeah. I could make an assessment and decide, okay, this feels good in the moment. And at every turn, you reiterate and you make an adjustment of your judgment as to whether it was accurate or not. And if the person proves that based on their actions, that maybe my assessment was a little too on the positive.
Yeah, a little too hasty and giving you a little,
Then I adjust accordingly,
right. Pull in the rein a little bit and say, right.
And in the inverse as well, they may prove to exceed my expectations.
Right, and then you give them more trust
even more trust, so that, and I guess that's, to me, the healthy way to approach it.
Right, I think so, but it still doesn't explain why we're at 3.2%.
Yeah.
That's a tough, I
think the most challenging part of that for me, the 3.2%, is that now I'm questioning how much of that has affected me. Being in that environment, being around people that their underlying view is that most people can't be trusted. being one of those people. So, so that am I a subject of my environment? Maybe I am.
Yeah.
Maybe my skepticism comes from something subconscious that I picked up from being around people who are naturally
Hypervigilant.
hypervigilant, cautious in their interactions. Would I have been a different person if I grew up in one of those countries that
where it's
the
in
trust was
general,
in the
very high
50,
trust.
60% range? Even here in New Zealand, would I have been a different person? Maybe. I can't say though that I regret being this person. I think that the skepticism, I think that there's a healthy level of skepticism necessary in interactions. Not to rehash everything that I said before, but just in terms of being cautious in your interactions with people, because malevolence does exist in the world.
Right.
And I don't think that being naive to that is of benefit to anybody.
I guess I just wonder whether it can end up being a situation of confirmation bias, or where we kind of go out into the world with that hypervigilance that is culturally embedded in us, and you look for the red cars, and therefore you see the red cars.
But if we were to be honest, and if we were to take that as that hypothesis being true, then it would mean that in coming here to a new place, being in New Zealand here, you would be, at this point, we probably would have seen more people that were not trustworthy, and the opposite has been true.
And what? So okay, so are our lenses as humans dependent on our environments then? Because how could we feel what we could feel in Trinidad and come somewhere else and feel how high trust the environment is? You see it in the way people interact with each other. Like there's just this general thing, like we've met amazing people, made amazing friends, and you don't feel like you have to question agendas or intentions, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, but I mean,
and so far it has proven
to be true. So that the
there's
question,
consistency and congruence in their actions. Yeah.
So I guess the question now would be, so I think what he asked was, how much is the conditioning as a result of the environment? Something along those lines, right?
That's what would be a great way to put it.
I think that is probably based on, if I were to take the information that received from the survey as being 100% accurate, right?
Because we know there are ways information could be taken, and
I would say that is just for me, is just confirmation that my judgment is good, because it means that because now I'm in this new environment, a different environment.
Yeah.
I don't feel the same way. Yes, I would still operate with a fair amount of skepticism in the beginning and interactions, as I would with any interaction that is new. But the people have shown themselves to, well, at least so far, to be a lot more trustworthy in terms of the actions and the way that
compared to people you've met back home, or a lot more trustworthy in terms of they are not as suspicious of you, so you aren't as suspicious of them. How much of it is that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I could honestly
because
answer
we have
that.
Great trust relationships back home with a lot of people.
Yeah. So I don't know if I could answer that honestly to say that.
Like it's like if somebody comes up to you and they're like kind of bracing like this physically, you would be like, okay, what's going on? Versus if somebody's coming up to you like, hi, it's different, right? So is it that people are less trustworthy, or is it that their initial demeanor?
Now that you're saying it, and I'm thinking about it in terms of interactions that I would have had over the years in Trinidad, and then the interactions that I would have here with people in the short time that we've been here, I think that it definitely is a two-way street, all right?
Okay.
It's not one-sided, so that what I may have been picking up on over the years is the level of skepticism that exists within the society that showed itself on that survey, right? And you function within a space and you read cues off of people and you act accordingly.
Yeah.
Not saying that you don't have autonomy over your actions or the decisions that you make, but
environment
you can't shake the realities of environmental conditioning. Like it is a real thing, right? So that functioning in a space where people are highly skeptical could be a contributing factor to my feeling of my skepticism, you know? And being in a different environment, it would shape the skepticism that you walk into situations with so that it guards you from naivety.
Right.
But not long after the initial interaction, you could feel the difference from the people in the way that they're dealing with you.
Yeah.
And then you realize that
There's
this
no
level of
reason to have
skepticism
it.
is not warranted.
I don't need to have all these walls up.
It's
I don't need to have
unnecessary.
my guard up. I don't need to brace.
It's unnecessary, you know?
And you know, that takes a lot of energy to brace, to be vigilant. So that, is it that we are spending, like back home, so much energy looking out for things that we miss how amazing connections could be? I would have done some weeks back when we started this exploration on a beginning level. I would have put out a question to some friends on socials and just asked a question ultimately around trust, but more function of it, where I would have noticed within myself when I was writing my first book, I kept it to myself for 2 years, even though I was hanging with my friends fairly regularly, every other week at least, thereabouts, and having deep conversations about all sorts of things in life. I was embarking on this new journey to explore the fictional side of myself, and I kept it so inward. I told very few people, and of the people that I probably should have told, because nothing would have been wrong with that, there were people that I could have trusted with it. Maybe there was a part of me that was just so sensitive around it because you're doing something so completely new and you have your own self-doubt and you don't want to hear anybody else's voices because it's already difficult enough for you to do this for yourself, and it's a lot. So in a situation like that, however, I found that I was unable to open up about something like this, even though it was with a lot of people who would have been objectively close to me in my life, things we would have spoken about in other areas. Now I wonder if that was a part of it. Like, is it that we feel this way in our society? And even in putting it out to people on my socials and asking them, I changed lanes without even putting on an indicator when I jumped into fiction. If I was on a road doing that, that would have been hugely inconsiderate for others. Is there a care or consideration you should have for others, and just indicating that I might be changing lanes? I would have probably hurt some people in keeping it to myself, and then they just find out with everybody else when I announced the fact that I was going to do this. The responses that came back were affirming.
This is in the responses from the social media posts.
Yes, were affirming that, no, keep those things to yourself. Don't tell other people, people may not have your best interest at heart. It was a general sentiment. You probably shouldn't trust that they do. This is, there's what we call bad mind and bad eye, and all the different things that we have in our society that speaks to that culturally, of people not really wishing the best on you and even trying some similitude or trying to speak words over your life. And what is it, stink eye is the other thing that they call it. Like, there's so many different names for it that they would refer to, and therefore the only way to protect something you truly care about is to keep it to yourself before anybody has a chance to get in the way of that.
I mean, that's concerning, right? That people would have that general sentiment, because even in exploring more deeply this concept of trust, we see how important trust is as a lubricant in terms of moving things forward within community and society holistically. And without trust, things tend to move a lot more slowly. It's funny that, or interesting that in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, where people don't believe that most people could be trusted, the ease of doing business is pretty low as well,
Fair.
right? So that
But a lot of those, but yes, I get it. A lot of those factors have to,
there are
with our systems and things in place. But yes, it is.
But I mean, which comes first,
Which comes first.
in terms of that, and the understanding that trust is a important cornerstone of a system functioning most efficiently.
Agreed.
The Speed of Trust book that we would have been exploring as well from Stephen Covey speaks to the equation of, in situations where trust goes up, the cost of business goes down and the speed goes up. And the inverse is also true. And where trust goes down, speed goes down and the cost goes up. In most business situations, there's a correlation between time and money.
Yeah.
So that things taking longer to get done that it's more expensive, so that trust is an important factor. It's a very important factor in terms of building community, is an important factor in terms of moving things forward. In working in groups, there's only so much that you as one person can do, so that you have to place some trust or place trust in others to be able to get the most things done in the most efficient manner.
Yeah.
And without that, things don't unfold well, or they don't unfold as quickly as they should, or as efficiently as they should. So the fact that the general sentiment based on your social media post is to keep things to yourself, don't share it with people, because people won't seek your best interest. And
is it a feature of us being untrustworthy as people, or is it a feature of us believing others to be untrustworthy? Are we actually untrustworthy, or is it that we think? And
it goes back to what we were talking about before. There's no way to really decipher where the line of one ends and the other begins,
But maybe it comes down to understanding this trust quadrants that Stephen Covey spoke about, because it's easy for us to talk about trust in terms that are up in the air, and but to break it down practically in terms of, okay, what does it mean for me to be trustworthy? What are the 4 things that I need to possess? And if it is that I am surveying my environment and I want to try to be a little more objective, because as far as we know, there are people that can be trusted. So maybe these are the 4 things you could look at as well to see, okay, can I trust this person? These would be a good start. The first one being integrity. And I think a lot of the contemplation around integrity can be difficult, because sometimes we see it as religion, and sometimes we see it as morals, and we see it as different things, ethics. But ultimately, integrity would be those values that you have, that belief system within you, that most importantly, you don't stray from under different circumstances. So that congruence is the word, right? Where it doesn't matter if you're in private or in public, inside or out, situations changing. If these are the things you believe, and these are the things that you think you should be doing, if I'm trying to be an honest person, or I am always trying to be kind to others, or whatever it might be, from the things that might seem most trivial all the way up, as long as it's something that you consistently do unconditionally, that forms what your belief systems are, what your values are. As to whether I think most people have sat with themselves to really assess what are my values and my belief systems, I don't know.
And that's difficult, so that to be congruent is a challenging thing.
Yeah.
Because people are complicated. And they're a ball of contradictions is probably the best way to describe them. So that unless the individual
and by
is
them
willing...
you mean us too, because we're not aliens. Continue.
Unless we as people are willing to really take the time to try to sort as best as possible, or to unravel the contradictions as best as possible, then we are not ever truly even aware of what our values are.
Yeah.
So then how could we claim to be integrous?
Yeah.
All right. So that the point of integrity is a very, very important one, but it's a complicated one.
It's a complicated one. But we do know that matters. Like if we were to say this is the first layer of things in terms of that quadrant, or what you could look for in somebody, or what you should look for in yourself, first of all, to even have self-trust, is, do I do the things that I say I will do? Like the things that I believe in, am I pursuing those things? Do I suddenly decide that, well, under this circumstance, it's okay for me to...
The gray areas.
Yeah, just cheat a little bit here, or lie a little bit here, or...
One of the definitions that I saw of integrity that I think that brought it home is the willingness to do the right thing, even in scenarios when nobody is looking.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
That's a good
brilliant.
benchmark.
Yeah.
If you ask yourself that question if you're about to do something and you ask yourself the question, how do I feel about this, taking into account that nobody is looking, could be a good gauge of how integrous you are as a person.
I like that. Okay, so following up with that became intention, which was differentiated from integrity, because intention speaks to that motive, that agenda thing that we like to say back home.
This intention.
Yeah.
Come back to home.
Come back. Yeah. So intention matters, but what is intention in this context?
In terms of what? In terms of
trust, in terms of this quadrant.
Well, so the intention
Motives,
speaks
agenda.
to motivations, yeah. It speaks to motivations. It speaks to a level of benevolence in terms of having the other person's best interests at heart.
But what was the thing that he said that we should do? It was communicate it, right?
Communicate it, because which ties
that
right
was
back to the
wow.
conversation we were having last time about your intentions matter only so much as the other person knows what they are. And that was a lesson that I had to learn over time. That
right.
You could think that your intentions are as good as you think that they are, but they have no value
if the other person doesn't even know. So then I can have all the integrity in the world. I could be doing all these things and so on. And somebody, so is that maybe that is a part of our trust issue back home, or maybe because people don't declare their intentions. Maybe if there's a practice that we can adopt where it's a part of the conversation of even asking somebody for something, that an intention can't be faked, right? That's one thing that was important. You can't make it up, like in even talking about this and trying to build trust with others and using these to assess trust when it comes to interactions. You can't fake these things. These things are hardcore, like they are coded into us. You can improve upon them, but you can't pretend it exists if it doesn't. So you can't say, well, if you have an intention to manipulate, oh no, I don't. I only want to have your back. It falls apart, right? It's built on sand. So then, if I have integrity, and I have pure intention, but I'm not communicating my intention to the other, I'm not building trust.
No.
I'm not creating an environment where trust can easily be nurtured.
Yes. So
even if I have integrity and pure intention.
Correct. So that it doesn't count, because trust is it forms the intersections between people.
Okay.
Right? So that if there's no communication of intent, then the point at which you are supposed to receive the cues of my trustworthiness never happens. So that if we look at it through that lens, then we'll understand that the communication part is, if not more important, just as important as having good intentions.
Yeah. And maybe also in communicating it, we help, because people are always filling the gaps, right? Those are blind spots for us. Other people's intentions are always going to be blind spots for us because we're not inside another person to know. So that you have a chance to fill in that blind spot with your truth, or it will be filled in for you by somebody else, and they will assume your intention. In a low trust environment like Trinidad and Tobago, you're saying that we generally believe most people can't be trusted. Yeah. Therefore, we are
more important.
We are filling in intentions. Yeah. So we are projecting that.
Correct, right. So in order to deal with that reality is even more important for us to state what our intentions are as clearly as is possible. To take the time to get clear, firstly, on what the intentions are, and then to state it. And that's a good benchmark or good trait to have, a practice to have as anybody that is in, not just in leadership positions, but just in interacting with people holistically, you know. State your intentions and state them as clearly as you can, as bluntly as you can, because it matters.
Okay, so I have my integrity on lock. My intention, I'm clear on it. I know what is motivating me. I've communicated it. What's next?
Capability.
Okay.
So the next tier, so now we move out of I like to look at it from the point of view of the first two things that are internal.
Right.
In that your integrity and your intentions are things that you need to get clear within yourself. Then we move into the external cues, your capabilities and results.
Right.
So we could look at them together, and that capabilities speak to your ability,
what you can do,
what you can do based on the circumstance.
Yeah.
So your skill sets, you know, your knowledge in a particular field, etc.
Right.
And results are the tangible output.
So whether you did the thing you said you can do.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Right. So you have to not just be able to, you have to do.
Right.
You know, and that's important.
Right.
So it's kind of connected to the thought process in terms of having good intentions, but also communicating it. It's the same kind of.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, like you have to be capable, but then you have to show results of your capability so that somebody else is able to make a fair assessment as to whether you are worthy of trust.
Right.
You know?
Okay. So then capability would be similar to what you've said recently in terms of you can't trust a mechanic where a doctor's work is concerned, you know, so that you may have the best mechanic in the world, but you're probably not going to ask that person to come operate on me, even though you could operate on my car.
Correct.
So capability is that, and having that understanding of what are my talents, what is my knowledge, you know, what can I really do here, you know, what are the skills, what is the style that I do is any. I think he gave like an acronym of tasks or something like that. But even with my capabilities, so I could have integrity, I could have great intention, I could communicate my intention. Let's say I want to get into business with somebody, and you know, our values are cohesive and aligned and compatible in nature. Great, that's awesome. We both have great intent and motivations. We've communicated that to each other. You bring a particular skill set to the table. Let's say you're on a business side and I'm on a tech side, and you know, so that person brings their business skill sets to the table. I bring my tech skill sets, but then I don't do my part.
You don't actually. So you have the capability, but you don't
produce the results. Yeah. Trust is broken.
Yeah.
Right there. So that makes me a talker and not a walker, basically.
Correct. And especially if so we're working on this project together, and there's an expectation from me that you will execute on X.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which goes back to the original code that you had stated about you having trust being the belief that you have that's
the confidence
yes,
that you will get what you desired out of somebody and not what is feared. Yes.
It ties right into that as a fundamental concept, that it's not just about your ability. You need to do what you say that you need to execute what you say you can execute, so that would reinforce the trust that that is being built in terms of our interaction.
So what I'm looking for, if I want to trust somebody, I'm looking for those 4 factors, and I'm looking for somebody who, it's difficult to know what somebody else's integrity and intentions are, but you can ask the questions of what are your values around these things? What do you believe? You can have the conversations, because sometimes it's not a very conscious thing until we have a conversation. It may be a new circumstance, like AI is, this summer of AI is taking the world by storm, and now the questions that people can ask each other, well, do you believe it's okay if AI produces generated images based on other people's artwork? It wouldn't have happened before for somebody to have a value-based view on that. But now that it has taken place, a question can be asked. People can think about it. So values and belief systems could develop
Yes.
over time.
Definitely.
So you can't ask somebody. So if you want to know if you can trust somebody because you want to work with them, you have a similar thing in mind, ask them what are their values and beliefs around these things in general, to work with in a relationship. For example, do you believe in being faithful? Do you believe in being honest? Like, what are the different values that you hold yourself to? What are your principles? Whatever else. And then intention, getting clear on that, asking that they communicate their intent, because these are not things everybody might know to do, but saying, it would really help me, to even ensure I'm not projecting something onto you if you communicate your intention with me during these times. Because other than that, like, I don't know, I have past experiences that have happened. I don't want to, have a blind spot here or just kind of fill in what I think you're doing based on past grievances and pains.
I mean, that is something that shows itself in relationships a lot.
It does.
Like even in our relationship, that is something that I had to learn over time, like making sure as best as it's possible to share
Yes.
my thought process and the communication along the lines of intention.
Connecting the dots.
Connect the dots for the other person.
Yeah.
Because it is very easy for
me to bring my life experiences and decide,
connect
these
your
are the
own
dots. Yep.
And
we all do it.
Yeah, and the other person is not able to connect the dots that you are connecting. So it's important to express
Communicate
it.
the intention and encourage each other to do it.
Now, going right back to the issue of awareness and consciousness and taking the time to even be aware of the dots that you're connecting, like that could get complicated as well, so that it's not taking that off of the table, but it's still your responsibility in terms of integrity and intention being the responsibility of the person that wants to be trusted, as well as
capabilities
and the results. Both parties need to take responsibility for their part.
Yeah.
And understand that, just as you are saying that if you're interacting with somebody that you want to extend trust to, that you have the right to ask these questions, it's important for the other party to take the time to get clear.
Get clear on the answers, yeah.
And
don't just lip service it.
Because
just to gain
important.
the opportunity, really try to build trust. Because you see, it might feel like it takes time, right? At the onset, when you really want to just get started. You have a crush on somebody and you just want to jump in to see where this goes, or you have a great business idea and you think you found the best person to do this with, and you just want to jump on the opportunity because this is another low trust thing in Trinidad. Somebody might steal my idea, right? Like immediately, so let me do it quick, that sort of thing. But if you take the time to actually do like a trust assessment intentionally and say, okay, these are the 4 things we need to discuss, let's keep it at that. And you do that, as much as it might take a while to get deep enough to bring out those answers and truly do the assessment. The promise is that the speed with which you'll actually be able to execute on these things or progress in your relationship and grow and all these things comes on the other side of strong trust.
Yeah.
Built trust.
Yeah.
So it's worth the initial investment. It's worth taking the time to do this, because on the other side of it is you jump in without this and then...
Yeah, things don't work out. Now, the other thing to note is that these 4 pillars are also a roadmap to rebuild trust if you've broken it, And I think that's an important part that needs to be stated as well, because...
all have sinned.
And when you do wrong, it's on you to restore, and don't just leave things, all right, I'll do better next time with somebody else.
Yes, please don't.
Take
it as an exercise for yourself as well, even if it doesn't work with the person. It's still...
take the time to assess the integrity and assess the intentions.
View whether you're capable. Are you truly capable of giving to this person the things that you promised? Because if trust is broken, one of these things or more have been broken, right? And I think a lot of people can overpromise.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to have been in relationships or dated people who genuinely had views of themselves that they were capable of doing and giving things that they weren't. So that and they wanted to. It's not that they didn't want to, but they just, in that iteration of their lives, weren't capable of giving that.
And I mean, sometimes that's difficult to admit.
Agreed.
So that it doesn't take away from that, but it's still important that you be honest with yourself, because notwithstanding that we've spent a fair amount of time in this conversation talking about trust between people, let's not negate the trust that could be broken within yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And the version of this where you are
Keeping your promises to
not
yourself.
keeping your promises to yourself,
right.
and the trust that's being broken little by little.
Which erodes your confidence.
Your confidence in yourself, and
Yep.
so that all these are contributing factors to the state of things turning out in the end. How things turn out in the end.
Let me ask that question then, Kev. Is that the reason for low trust? I mean, we don't know it, but this is a hypothesizing, right?
It could be a spiral.
Is that the reason for low trust in our country? Is it because people actually don't trust themselves?
And it could
And
be
they have not restored that relationship with themselves in terms of keeping their word to themselves, in terms of could that therefore be the reason why we brace from people without there even being a reason, the guilty until proven innocent, because we are guilty of breaking trust within ourselves?
It's possible. It's a possible contributing factor, you know, and yeah.
Somebody needs to research this. Whoever's out there, do it.
You know, there's a lot here. But I think that at the very least, if we want to tackle the high level of distrust that exists when it comes to the larger institutions that we place so much faith in,
It starts with us.
we had to start to take stock of
Yeah.
let's not just externalize the distrust.
Yeah.
Ask yourself the questions: Are you part of the problem? Are you part of the problem?
Because we could project it onto the media and project it onto the government, project it onto this, but if we can't even trust the people in our homes or the friends that we have or any of this, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, are we a part of the problem? Are you right? Huh.
So
I just want to let you know, I trust you.
I trust you
No.
with my life.
Everything, my life, my future, all of it. Thank you for building this life with me, brick by brick.